On May 2, 2011, U.S. Navy SEALs pulled off the most famous assassination operation in modern history, right? They eliminated Osama bin Laden. But get this, the second he was crossed off the list, a brand new name took the #1 spot on the FBI's most wanted list. And it actually wasn't an international terrorist at all. It was a guy from Boston who caused literally the biggest security scandal in United States history, Whitey Bulger. So let's dive into this explainer, head back to 1970s Boston, and figure out exactly how this happened.
So here is the core mystery we're unraveling today. Why on earth would the FBI ever protect a violent criminal? We are going to see exactly how a desperate, tactical alliance against the Italian mafia totally mutated into this unparalleled system of corruption, turning a street-level gangster into an absolutely untouchable monster.
Section 1. The Italian Mafia Threat. 1970s Boston.
Okay, to really understand the FBI's initial desperation, we first need to look at the massive national security threat they were facing back in 1975. The Italian mafia had reached a level of power that honestly made traditional law enforcement look completely useless. They controlled nightclubs, restaurants, real estate, and yeah, they even had politicians in their pocket. If things kept going this way, experts projected that by the year 2000, the mafia would literally be the ultimate authority in America. Plus, an open gang war had just erupted on the streets of South Boston. So the FBI, they were legally constrained, totally desperate, and scrambling for a highly unorthodox solution.
Section 2. A Deal with the Devil. Quincy Beach, 1975.
Well, this brings us to a fateful, entirely off-the-books meeting on Quincy Beach in 1975. A 35-year-old FBI agent named John Connolly sat down with Whitey Bulger. Now, Bulger was the leader of the Winter Hill Gang. It was pretty small at the time, but the really crucial detail here is that Connolly and Bulger were actually childhood friends from the exact same neighborhood. Agent Connolly offered a desperate trade. If Bulger helped the FBI destroy the Italian mafia from the inside out, the agency would protect him and just miraculously make all of his own legal troubles disappear.
And Bulger's response? He said, "I won't be an agent. I will be a collaborator." Man, that just perfectly captures his mindset right from the jump. He was super suspicious at first, but once he realized the FBI was basically handing him a shield, he set his own terms. There was no written contract. None. It was just a shadowy, verbal agreement that let Bulger serve his own interests, wipe out his rivals, and expand his empire, all while the FBI got those easy arrests and splashy press conference victories they so desperately wanted.
Section 3. The Informant Takes Control. Into the Boston Underworld.
Now, let's look at how this builds into an absolute disaster for the entire city of Boston. Because at first, the plan actually worked. By 1981, using Bulger's direct intelligence, the FBI successfully bugged the mafia's headquarters. And by 1983, the mafia's leadership was totally dismantled, with the boss getting slapped with 45 years in prison. The FBI threw these massive press conferences celebrating their own genius. But, in reality, they had secretly just cleared the board of all competition. With the Italian mafia out of the picture, Whitey Bulger stepped right into that vacuum, becoming the undisputed, unchallenged crime lord of Boston. He just swallowed up all the illegal trade.
Of course, Bulger started testing the limits of this new immunity. Anytime the local police got even slightly close to arresting him, the FBI intervened. It was wild. Files would just vanish from desks, wiretaps were mysteriously sabotaged. It got so blatantly obvious that local police officers started joking that Bulger must be carrying around a secret FBI badge. And get this, the FBI actually had to issue a formal directive banning officers from making that joke.
Section 4. Buying the FBI. How deep did the corruption run?
So, how exactly does a mobster get federal agents to actively cover up his violent crimes, or even let him ship C4 explosives over to the IRA in Ireland? The core reason why the FBI protected this criminal lies in a massive, tangled web of corruption. Bulger didn't just buy off his childhood friend, Agent Connolly, though he did pay him around $235,000 in cash, which, by the way, is over $2 million in today's money. No, he literally bought the head of the Boston FBI field office, John Morris. Morris was living it up with fine wine, first-class flights, and luxury vacations. And they didn't even call them bribes. They were just framed as nice gifts between friends.
But you might be wondering, what about the honest agents who wouldn't take the dirty money? Well, for them, the currency was pure terror. In Boston's underworld, literally everyone knew that if you crossed Whitey Bulger, you'd end up dead in an unmarked grave. So a lot of FBI agents basically just decided that accepting a bottle of fine wine and looking the other way was a whole lot better than ending up in a concrete barrel. Through bribery and sheer fear, Bulger basically became the secret director of the Boston FBI.
Section 5. The House of Cards. A deadly blind spot.
Now, this incredibly corrupt setup created a huge, terrifying blind spot between the data being sent over to Washington, D.C. and the bloody reality happening down on the streets. Washington was absolutely thrilled. They were patting themselves on the back, reading these manufactured reports about a collapsing mafia. But meanwhile, the Massachusetts State Police were pulling their hair out. Every single time they built a solid case against Bulger, it just mysteriously fell apart. They felt like they were dealing with a ghost who was always one step ahead, completely unaware that his informants were the exact federal agents they were supposed to be trusting.
Over 170. Just think about that number for a second. That is the estimated number of lives claimed either directly or indirectly by Whitey Bulger during his reign. It really highlights the devastating, irreversible human cost of the FBI's protection. The agency was so desperate to secure a bureaucratic win that they allowed a serial killer to operate with absolute impunity.
To show you just how dark this truly got, let's look at the case of Brian Halloran back in 1982. Halloran was a low-level criminal, and he went seeking FBI protection, offering some really devastating evidence against Bulger. He sat down and spoke to Agent John Connolly, and what did Connolly do? He immediately picked up the phone, called Bulger, and warned him that Halloran was leaving the building. Just 15 minutes later, Halloran, along with an innocent father who just happened to be giving him a ride, were ambushed, tortured, and murdered. The FBI had quite literally become Bulger's personal hit squad.
Section 6. A brutal end. The Empire falls.
Eventually, Bulger's own greed just pushed him way too far. He started expanding outside of Boston, which finally caught the attention of uncorrupted federal investigators down in Washington. By 1993, the walls were rapidly closing in. These outside investigators started noticing that every criminal associated with Bulger magically ended up in prison, while Bulger himself just kept thriving. Realizing the gig was entirely up, Boston FBI boss John Morris literally ran to the DEA to confess everything, begging for protection. Facing the exposure of an estimated 271 compromised agents, Connolly gave Bulger one last tip in December 1994 about a secret indictment. And with that, Bulger packed up his hidden cash, grabbed his fake passports, and simply vanished into thin air.
Honestly, it took 16 incredible years to finally find him. Bulger was a master of FBI tactics, so he lived entirely off the grid, surviving on cash and dead men's identities. But in 2011, the FBI tried a brilliant new tactic. They ran daytime TV ads directly targeting older women, specifically focusing on Bulger's girlfriend and her known love for dental work and plastic surgery. Well, a former Miss Iceland living in Santa Monica, California, saw the ad and instantly recognized her friendly neighbor, Carol Gosco. The FBI raided apartment 303, arresting an 81-year-old Bulger who, by the way, had nearly $1 million in cash and 30 weapons stashed inside the walls of his quiet little beachside home.
Fast forward to 2013, Bulger was finally convicted of 31 charges, including his role in 11 murders. During his trial, he flat out refused to be called an informant. He insisted he was a partner who managed the FBI, not the other way around. Then, in October 2018, at the ripe age of 89, he was transferred to one of the most brutal prisons in West Virginia. And within 24 hours of him arriving, the mafia exacted their traditional, gruesome revenge on the rat who played the system. He was found beaten to death, his eyes and tongue removed, the absolute ultimate mafia punishment for an informant.
So, as we close the classified files of this black box vault, we are left staring at a pretty chilling reality. We now know exactly why the FBI protected criminals. It was this toxic mix of bureaucratic desperation, totally unchecked power, and basic human greed. But it definitely leaves you wondering, if a single ruthless mobster could buy an entire federal field office and run it like his own personal gang for 2 decades, is a devil's bargain like this happening again right now? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning what you see.